Hey guys, welcome back to Real Housewives Recaps. Today, we're talking our king. That's right, this is the second video of the series. In case you missed it yesterday, I explained I'm dealing with terrible allergies. I feel great. I just sound a little crazy. So, thank you for bearing with me through this. I just couldn't wait to talk about this book. I have a lot to get into today. So, if you recall, we're on chapter 16. The title is H&M of this chapter, and we're going to pick right back up where Charles had dropped that bombshell saying that he could not afford to pay for Meghan on top of everybody else. And like I said in yesterday's video, I do plan on making a separate video about the money that she spent when she was a quote, I'm using quotation marks like Joey from Friends, working royal, because I really want to get into that. But for now, we'll continue on Robert Jobson's book. Okay. So here's where things get interesting. Now, where he writes from the point of view of Charles and what's going on with Charles, he skips, some of the details that we've gotten in some of the other books. And that's okay. We've heard it a million times, the tantrums of stories. But what he does do is he kind of gives a different perspective on things. And what I mean is, again, in chapter 16, he goes into, it was not Meghan who threw a tantrum over the tiara. I'm so sick of talking about tiara. I've talked about it to death. Definitely go back and watch the videos because I go into it. But I'm never sick of learning a new story about Harold and fraud. So we'll go into it. Apparently, according to this book, it was not Meghan who threw the tantrum over the tiara. It was Harry. So he seems to write from the point of view of Harry expected everything for Meghan. And read into that what you will. I'm reading that she had his nuts in her hands and was squeezing tighter, and so he wanted to continue to make her happy. But eloquent, right? It's a cold medicine. But okay, so yeah, it was Harry that was throwing the tantrum so bad that William felt compelled to step in and intervene in the jewelry row. So this was interesting. It sounds like William, like I said in yesterday's video, he's been trying to help Harold behind the scenes, but Harry makes every bad decision ever and can't see that and just likes to whine that nobody's helping him. Wonder where he learned that from. Well, him and Meghan both. But okay, so William tried to step in. He went to the Queen directly and got clarification about who was entitled to wear what jewels that had once been worn by their late mother, Diana. So, of course, William's wife, Catherine, love her, due to her seniority and position as the next Princess of Wales and future Queen Consort, had, of course, first right of refusal, and then it would trickle down from there. Harry, during this time, felt like William did not have his back, and, of course, I laugh like that because it's just ridiculous. It sounds like William obviously had his back. He kept trying to help him every step of the way, tried to make him feel like, I do support you. He even put out that statement I talked about last time of support for Harry. He was just questioning, are you sure about this? Just make sure. But the author does point out that Harry felt like William didn't have his back on his marriage or approve of his choice of bride, and that it seemed to be a, quote, overreaction. But it was the beginning of the rift between the brothers. I don't know that it was the beginning. Based on the other books, it sounds like it was just split wider. But it was according to this book, the beginning of the rift between the brothers that has not healed to this day. The close bond between the siblings had been irreparably damaged. Not only were the brothers' relationships strained, but their wives were not on the best of terms either. Gee, you think? Again, this writer, Robert Jobson, his whole thing is to go into Charles's point of view. And he goes into how on occasions, both of his sons have challenged him. He says that William has even been known to speak forcefully to his father. One exchange between them was so heated that it left Charles shaken. Both of his sons' tempers are reminiscent of that of their mother, Diana's, which Charles had struggled to cope with during their marriage. So basically, Charles didn't intervene. He was hoping that it would all blow over, but instead of a line being drawn under it, the relationship between the two sons deteriorated even further. Then he goes into the wedding day itself. And again, I wish we got more details, but that just doesn't seem to be his point of view. He's more about Charles. So he says, on the day of the wedding itself, crowds were blissfully ignorant about the simmering feud between the brothers and lingering animosity between their wives. Tens of millions from around the world tuned in on 19th of May 2018 to see Harry and Meghan wed at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. An A-list of celebrities such as Oprah and David and Victoria Beckham, George and Mal Clooney were among the 600 guests who joined the royal family. Okay, so as we know, of course, Thomas Markle Sr. was not able to attend. Instead, Charles was, quote, delighted to be able to welcome Meghan into his family after she asked him to stand in for her father. So those watching couldn't help but be enchanted by Charles's poise at the moment that really could have been quite awkward. The moment that the author describes where Charles smiled at Meghan and gently placed her arm under his and kind of patted her. And it seems like it was a sweet moment. And then Harry apparently whispered, "Thanks, Pa." And it was a sign of love between father and son. It sounds like had some rocky times, but they were doing well at this point. It was even noted that, remember, Doria was there by herself, Meghan's only invited relative, of course. Charles could sense her awkwardness, and he graciously took her hand and had her walk with he and Camilla to go sign the register for the royal wedding of their children. It really doesn't go into too much more of the wedding. No other juicy details. From here, we go into 4 days later. It was the 23rd of May, 2018, Prince of Wales garden party. Remember, it was Charles's 70th. And it was a birthday patronage celebration. Okay, so we've been over this as well, but the only insight that was given here, I guess, I didn't fully understand what this part. I just thought it was a birthday party for Charles, but it was 6,000 people were invited from 386 of Charles's patronages and 20 of his military associations. Several guests from the police, fire, ambulance services, mountain rescue, a lot of other people. Inevitably, though, the photographer's lens focused on the new Duchess of Sussex. Now, I wish he had gone into what the heck was going on. But instead, his point of view, again, was from Charles, the writer. He doesn't go into everything we know went down at this garden party. Instead, he talks about how Harry was having a rare moment of warmth toward his father. He referred to him as Pa again. Charles referred to Harry as darling boy. Harry went on to give in his speech, he just asked that everybody say a huge thank you to Charles's incredible work for over nearly 50 years. Harry goes on to wrap up the speech by saying that he and William draw inspiration from Charles every day. Man, how the times have changed, right? And the author notes that it's the high point of their father-son relationship. Okay, then we switch into chapter 17. And again, where this one focuses more on Charles, they don't go into a lot of details along the way. So we skip right ahead to the arrival of baby Archie. And what the author goes into here is beneath the surface, tensions had continued to be strained. It had been terrible between William and Harry during this time. While surely wanting to knock his sons' heads together, Charles stayed out of the quarrels. This is where I'm taking a side note. This is where I have a problem, and I've had a lot of you say the same thing in the comments. I am very much William and Catherine. I'm Team William and Catherine. I have trouble with Charles because it sounds like he tends to step back from some of these things. And maybe I'm misreading it. You guys can definitely let me know in the comments if you feel differently. But I've said it before. I respect Charles and his position. I am going to the coronation and I'm looking forward to celebrating. I'm definitely a royalist. But just personally, I have a problem with the way it's been explained in all the books that Charles seems to, again, I'm American, you guys can fill me in if I'm wrong, sit back and not try to get involved in stuff like this. He wants to just be a peacemaker. And I'm thinking, no, you need to get in there and tell Harry to get his head out of his ass. I don't know. I mean, it's like this coronation thing. If it were up to me, Harry would not have been invited. But I've had a lot of you explain your position and why you think Charles did the right thing. And I get it. I do. I just personally, I don't love this about Charles, that it sounds like he takes a backseat approach, whereas William's in there trying to snap Harry out of it. But back to the book, the author explains Charles stayed out of the quarrels, and Harry and Meghan were set on a course that would have far-reaching consequences, not only for Charles, but for the monarchy he serves. Okay, so then the author takes a step back to examine the so-called Fab Four. Remember, that was the handle given the Beatles in their heyday. But anyway, it was the foursome of William, Catherine, Harry, and Meghan. They had, quote, star quality and abundance. So they'd done this Royal Foundation Forum. This was February 2018. Remember, they got married in May. However, they were giving the impression of lighthearted banter, but take a look at old Smeggy there. She has her claw out. She has her daggers on. She only has eyes for William. The usual. So this interviewer asks if they had had any family disagreements. They all four disagree, and William says yes. And Harry says, well, they're healthy disagreements. Okay. The interviewer asked for more details, and Harry sidestepped it. He says, I can't remember. They come so thick and so fast. Well, then the interviewer asks if the disagreements have been resolved, and William says, is it resolved? We don't know. Before elaborating a little bit, he says they have four different personalities and, gives a stock answer, basically. But then goes on to say that we're stuck together for the rest of our lives. God, I love William, if I haven't said that lately, but the expression stuck together seemed to say it all. So, staged stuff, be damned, PR smiles, be damned. Here's the truth. They were stuck together. Okay, so then Meghan decided to use this opportunity to speak up, and she got political. And as we know, the royals don't get political. She decided to name check the Me Too and the Time's Up movements, things like that. It was very uncomfortable. Okay, so it's brought up that you have to remember the hierarchy, that she's becoming a member of a constitutional hierarchy, which depends on everyone knowing their place and towing endless invisible lines. Well, obviously we know Meghan was not interested at all in that. So things were rough between the four of them, but Charles was still trying with Meghan. He invited her to join he and Camilla on a private tour of his, quote, Prince and Patron exhibition in the staterooms of Buckingham Palace to mark his 70th birthday year. Meghan accepted enthusiastically. She was keen to see a special display of more than 100 works of art personally selected by the prince. But when her advisors were told that they would be joined by this film crew for his BBC documentary, Prince, Son, and Heir, Charles at 70, she belatedly pulled out of it. I didn't even know about this one. Canceling on the heir to the throne after one has accepted an invitation is usually inexcusable, but Charles let it slide. So I found this tidbit interesting because why would she ever turn down any chance to be on TV? So my only question was, this was again, before the wedding. Was it already a contractual thing with a future Oprah? I just didn't know why would she turn that down? It seemed to be once she was made aware of the BBC documentary, she didn't want to be a part of it. And so I just wonder what that was about. But I think the author was telling the story more from Charles did every possible thing to include her, make her feel welcome, include her in these things. And they do, a lot of books we've read go into how Catherine she wasn't included until after the marriage into these things. And that's typically how it's done. But they made special exception for Meghan, whereas they thought that she didn't really have a family and it was, kind of a unique situation. And they were trying their best with her. They did try to include her in things. But she would do things like this and cancel. The part that I also found interesting is this book does explain that Meghan seemed to be fascinated by British history and royal history way more so than Harry, who, quote, is admittedly not a star pupil when it comes to such matters. And sources said that she had been poring over notes as she studied the Commonwealth. Charles saw the work ethic and passion for philanthropy reflected in his new daughter-in-law, who had campaigned to raise awareness of women's issues. It would not have escaped his notice that she also shared his belief in the importance of organic food. And then I'm going to leave you off on this juicy tidbit here because this is fascinating. Apparently, Camilla, too, tried to play her part as a, quote, sort of super granny, dispensing humor and down-to-earth advice to Meghan. She tried to help her. But Meghan made it clear that she would make her own decisions. I wish the author had given more examples, but he didn't. But apparently, we've talked about this, when the Queen, who had asked her then assistant, private secretary Samantha Cohen, to work alongside Meghan just for a period while Meghan got settled. So handpicked by the Queen to work with Meghan, Samantha Cohen then suggests, hey, you should really turn to Sophie, at the time, Countess of Wessex, for support and advice. Meghan dismissed the idea, saying, quote, I've got Harry. Well, of course, this got back to the Queen, and the Queen was completely surprised by this. So the next part gets juicy because it goes into further actions that she and Harry took to estrange, basically, William and Charles, and to not include them in their plans and to spark controversy, including that ITV interview in South Africa that we've been talking about. That's just the most tone-deaf thing ever. But again, I think this book is interesting because I love to dive down into all these events, but we've done that. So this is more from the point of view of Charles and sometimes William and how they were trying to help things behind the scenes and trying to include Meghan and trying to stroke Harry's ego, his giant ego, and not infuriate him. And that is something that came up quite a bit in this book is how Harry's would throw these tantrums and have these terrible mood swings, and his mood was just getting worse, it sounded like. So this is where I'm going to leave it. We are into chapter 17. I'm enjoying the heck out of this. I really am. I apologize for my voice. Hopefully I'll sound more human tomorrow. I sound better than I did yesterday. But guys, as always, thanks so much for being here and for watching. We really appreciate the support so much. If you want to further support the show, I do encourage you to check out my Patreon. I do a lot of extra content over there, deep dives, lots of fun stuff. I even cover episodes of Sex and the City if that's your jam, but a lot of Harry and Meghan stuff. So check that out. It's patreon.com/Real Housewives Recaps. That's where you can become an executive producer. I'd like to thank my executive producers so much for all the support. So I'm going to read your names, and if you want to become one, check it out on patreon.com. All right, a huge thank you to Linda. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Paige. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you to Mary. Thank you to Amy. Thank you, Mr. K. Thank you, Kay. Thank you to Shauna and to Brenda. Thank you, Aaron and Frank. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Ann M. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Ann H. Thank you, Karen. Thank you to Corey. Thank you to Glennis. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Dewey. Thank you to Patty. Thank you to Adair Becker. Thank you to Erica. Thank you, Amber. Thank you to Annette, to Barb G. Thank you, Diana LOL. Thank you, Allison B. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, KT. Thank you, Jolene. Thank you, Stromboli. Thank you to Catherine. Thank you to Loie. Thank you to Lucy H. Thank you to Georgia. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Robin's Landing. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Mara. Thank you, Ashley C. Thank you, Molly. Thank you to Amber. Thank you to Ashley. Thank you to Amanda. Thank you to Michelle. Thank you, Sansquid. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you to Dee Dee. Thank you to Nina. Thank you to Heather. Thank you to Tracy. Thank you, Penny. And thank you, Domby. Thank you, Android P. Thank you, S, and thank you, Aaron M. So if you would like your name shouted out and as an executive producer, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Real Housewives Recaps. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Can't wait to bring you the next part of Spare Us. Take care. Bye-bye.